Okay, folks, this is Steve again. We're going to go ahead and get started here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steve Keyser. I'm the Library Systems Admin for MCFLS, and today we're going to be talking about serials within the Sierra client interface. Before we get started, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we're going to organize the meeting today. We've got a big group, so this might work better than what we would do for a small group. First of all, what I'm going to do is mute all of the participants so we don't get any ambient noise coming through from your side or anybody's side, so people can focus on what's being presented here. What's going to happen is we'll go through the presentation, and at the end, if you have any questions, you can submit them using the chat interface at the bottom of your GoToMeeting console, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. We are using a training server today. We do have access to Sierra Preview, as you know, those of you who got the message yesterday. The training server that we're using today has more access than what our preview is allowing us to see right now. You really can't get into the depths of serials in our preview mode because of everything being kind of locked down in preview. The session is being recorded. I will have it available on mcflis.org under the continuing education area after you log in with your email and password. We also have a MCFLS channel on YouTube. If you just go to YouTube and type in MCFLS, MCFLS 1, numeral 1, you'll see our channel at the top of the screen, and you'll see all the videos there for these training sessions. I've got the same goals for all these training sessions, so I hope those of you who have attended these in the past won't mind. The primary goal is to give you what you need to know to be able to work with Sierra on April 2nd and moving forward with regard to serials. The secondary goal is to give you assurance that most of the functions work in exactly the same way as they do in Millennium. There's a couple exceptions with serials, but for the most part, it's very anticlimactic. You're going to be able to figure this out fairly quickly once we move along. Just to give you an idea of what the timetable looks like, the staff preview started yesterday, Monday. Hopefully all of you have seen the email that was sent out, passed on to you regarding staff preview. And I'll talk a little bit how that is going to work in terms of your logins. But just so you know, we are asking everyone to log in during this month period before we go live on April 2nd to test a few things, mostly your ability to log into the system, your functions menu, which I'll show you in Sierra here, your printer settings, as well as your settings such as your macros, your function keys, otherwise known as macros, and your new record templates. That's another area that people, not so much in serials, but in circulation, for example, it's pretty important. Sierra Preview is more or less a way to just look at the data. You're not going to be able to make changes to records. You're not going to be able to check in serials. You're not going to be able to look at the notices area, for example, or even use create lists. It's very locked down in terms of what we're able to do in terms of changes to the database. However, you can do searches against the database. You can see what the interface is going to look like, and it's more or less what we're after at this stage of the game. April 2nd is still our go-live date. That hasn't changed. The system will be unavailable for the entire day, similar to January 20th. And this goes for acquisitions as well as serials, but I left it here in my notes, is to say that the same procedures we used to prepare for that day will be used on April 1st, and I will send out the information you'll need to do. This is more of an acquisitions thing, but you'll need to do things like stop ordering, clear the payment history file a day before we go live. So everything has to be cleared out before they can make this transition over to Sierra. And I'll send that information out to the libraries 2 weeks before we go live. Okay, what I'm going to do first is talk a little bit about the basics of Sierra and logging in, and then we'll talk in general terms about some of the differences between Millennium and Sierra, and then we'll go into the more specific areas related to serials and serials check-in. So now that we're in preview mode, you have some of you may have already done this step already of logging in. So we're going to go through it, the basics and how we're going to log in differently based on where you are. The process for logging in for MPL staff is a little different than Suburban. It involves a process similar to Millennium because many staff members at Milwaukee Public Library neighborhood libraries will rotate to different branches, so it includes Central as well. The acquisitions, serial staff, the CCDM staff at Milwaukee Public do not have this issue of logging in twice like they do in Millennium. Their initials are set up differently. But for everyone else at Milwaukee Public, particularly in CERC, reference any of the service desk areas, you're going to be logging in like you had been in Millennium, but using different logins. The process for the Suburban staff is much different actually. It involves one login for your initials. So basically what Sierra is doing is we've merged your general logins, for example, CERC MC40, or for serials MSER. Those logins and all those settings that are associated with those logins are now merged with your initials for your location. So when you log in with your initials, that's all you need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and here and log in with my training password. And we're using a training server out in California, so there may be a slight delay in just getting out there. For the most part, all the modules and functions that you have in Millennium have counterparts in Sierra. There's a couple of small differences between the two, but I'm going to point those out with regard to serials. So we should be logging in here in a second. Okay. I'm going to modify my screen here a little bit. Okay, so right now in our preview mode in Sierra for MCFLS, we don't have this ability, but I wanted to show you where it's located. You'll see underneath the admin screen here, we now have the ability to change our password. This isn't live yet in our preview mode, but it will be following April 2nd. If you click on this change password, this is where you're going to now change your password for your initials. We no longer will have the SSH or Telnet client for this purpose. We're going to be using the Sierra desktop application, or SDA, for all of this. So this is where you would change your password in the new client. Just want to talk a little bit about the layout of the screens in Sierra, some of the basics before we get into serials. The biggest difference with Sierra versus Millennium is that Sierra uses a unified client, which means there are no more modules or different logins for different functions. So for example, your circulation, your serials, your acquisitions, cataloging, all of those functions are in one area or one screen that you would then use this function menu in the upper left-hand corner to switch between. So right now I'm set to look at the catalog, but I can easily go to serials check-in. I can go out to the checkout circulation desk area, or any other of these areas that I'm set up to look at. It means no more hopping between windows if you don't need to do it. On the opposite side of the screen are these command menu options at the top. These mimic, for the most part, what you would see in Millennium. There's not too much of a difference. There is a big difference for one of them, but they are context sensitive, so based on the function that you're in, your tools, for example, will change quite a bit. But I think that was always the case in Millennium anyway, so that none of that's really changing too much. A couple of language changes. The way Sierra refers to things. If you can see these areas here in the function drop-down menu, cataloging student, serials check-in, front desk circ, administration, these all correspond to, these headings all correspond to the modules that you would use in Millennium. Those are referred to now as workflows. And these areas underneath each heading, catalog, binding to bindery, these are called functions now within Sierra. I use these interchangeably. These are technically these areas here were called modes in Millennium, but you'll hear me use these interchangeably, so it's not a big deal. I just want to let you know, if you're looking at, for example, help manuals, they'll refer to functions now instead of modes, or workflows quite a bit. The macros are quite different in Sierra versus Millennium. Those macros, you can actually view your set of macros in preview underneath admin and settings. And it's the first tab here. Mine's quite large here. We're combining all these settings and options for these logins into user initials, so all this information has to go somewhere. So it's underneath settings and options. But if we go to macros here, you can see that I've got one macro set up here, but your set of macros that you've been using in Millennium have for the most part been brought over into Sierra, and they're functional right now. That's one of the areas that I would like everyone to test if they have that option. The one exception to these macros is this Go command area. In each module, I'll bring up serials. I've got serials for Millennium here. If I go to this Go menu in serials, you'll notice that all of these functions listed here are directly related to serials workflows. So serials check-in, routing, binding, claiming. However, if I go to this same area here, if I change my mode here to serials check-in and then go to Go menu here, it's still showing me all of these different areas even if they're not related to serials. So if you have Go command menus, meaning if you have function keys mapped to, for example, serials check-in or routing, we had to make changes to those, so that's one of the things we'd like to have you test before we go live on April 2nd. We had to change those manually. They didn't match up correctly if we just brought them over straight from Millennium. This is really important distinction. Just because you see all of these functions here in the Sierra function drop-down does not mean that you have access to all of this. All of your authorizations, the same authorizations that you used in Millennium, have now been also brought over into Sierra. So your circ aids are not going to be able to do global update, for example, or delete all records. Those types of functions that they're not authorized to do. Even though if they see the drop-down menu option, they're not going to be able to do it unless they have the authorization. With regard to these workflows, we do have the ability to customize these, but when we go live on April 2nd, we've made the best way we could is give people as much of these options as possible. So all of the staff, for example, with the suburban libraries will all see circulation, cataloging, acquisitions, and serials. Even if it's perhaps not part of their job, at least they'll be able to see everything when we go live April 2nd. and they'll be able to do everything and not be missing stuff. That's one of the areas we'd like people to give us feedback on. If there's things that you're seeing there that you need that aren't listed in this drop-down, please let us know, and then we can add that for you. Okay, so now I wanted to talk a little bit about serials in Sierra, some of the differences. There's really not a whole lot of difference. We're in serials check-in mode right now. It's just another way to search the database. We use the same indices as before. We're in the training database, so these are a little different. Ours says journal rather than series or serial title, but most of these are the same as what you would find in our own database. It's just a little bit different. There is something that we just discovered this past week. Let me just do a search real quick before we get too far. So I'm going to do a serials title search for time, and then click on the search button. These search results are really the biggest difference between what you're seeing in Millennium versus what we have in Sierra. This browse display can be altered if we do the same search here in our database. Let's do it. It's got to be a journal title. Okay. You'll notice that all the journal title index entries show up here. It's a little different, well, it's a lot different than what you're seeing here in Sierra, where you have a lot more information in each entry, and they're not sorted by index or grouped by index entry. We can change that so it looks more like this. It looks a little different. You still have most of the facets. This phrase area here would be gone, but this setting change is called compact browse, and I think it most closely resembles what we're using right now in Millennium in terms of your browse results. So that's something that we may change for everyone based on feedback. I've modified it for one person already. This is their default browse, and I just want to walk you through this a little bit before we go on. So I did my serials title search for time. You'll notice that there are a few extra columns here on the right-hand side. There's a summary column that shows you how many, what the bib number is, whether there's an available item on the bib, how many items or orders are attached, and how many holdings records are also attached. These are their check-ins. When we're set up correctly in Sierra with our book jackets, that's the preview column is where those book jackets will appear. On the left-hand side, we have facets that are similar to what we're using in the Encore catalog or the new County Cat. It's a little bit scaled down. There's not as many facets here, but you will be seeing, for example, facets for format, language, and locations. We have an issue right now with our facets for locations. They're showing numbers as well as the actual descriptions of the location. For example, 17 for King or 83 for Cudahy. But that will be fixed very shortly here. It's just a display issue. However, you can click on any one of these, double-click on, for example, one of these locations, and it will limit your display to those results for that particular library. So it's using a lot of the same type of technology that we use in Encore, and it's just bringing it over into Sierra. It's using that same technology. One of the things that's really nice about Sierra, and you'll see it everywhere within this desktop application, you'll notice that these eyes here they're in the lower right-hand corner for every entry. If you mouse over the eye, it will give you more information about that particular title. This is only available in this default display. In the compact browse, it doesn't show up. But if you mouse over that, it will give you more information about the title, so you don't have to necessarily double-click on it and go into the full record to see more information about it. These are not just available here, but they're also available in patron records. If you go to create list, they're available there. It's actually a really nice thing that you don't have to double click on a record to actually see what's in it. And lastly, about database searching, we don't have a limit button anymore next to the series of buttons at the top. There is this plus sign which has taken its place. So if you click on the plus sign, you can further limit your search results by these common limiters that we've been using in Millennium for forever. Didn't see this last time we did this, but if you do a limit search in Millennium, I don't see the ability to, I guess it's just a little different. You can choose multiple limits in Millennium here. It's a little different process in Sierra where you can actually just click at this plus sign and add as many material types to search as you like. But it works the same way in Millennium, as in Millennium, but it will work better. We've had issues with that limiting function, as some of you know. Okay, if we just go into the full record, go into this one. You'll see this a lot in Sierra for those of you who haven't seen this before. All these areas here, these buttons that are on the left-hand side of the screen were once tabs here in Millennium. And you'll see that a lot in Sierra. They've moved all of these tabs over to the left-hand side of the screen, and I think it actually does look a lot better in terms of organization of information. It just seems easier for me to work with. So you'll see that a lot throughout Sierra. If we look at the full record display, we can go to View or Edit here. This looks very similar to Millennium with a couple differences. I think it's better organized for one. They've tried to mimic OCLC in terms of display. If you've been to the OCLC site or worked with OCLC, you notice this looks a lot very similar to what they're using. The indicators area, these two columns here after the tag are the indicators, and that's just a lot easier to work with here in Sierra than it ever was in Millennium, at least my personal opinion. All of the codes that we're using in Millennium have been brought over to Sierra already, so there's no worries about recreating things in this database. At least to my knowledge, nothing is missing. And most of what they're going to be doing, they've already seeded our database. Most of what they're going to be doing on April 2nd is kind of catching up everything else that needs to be brought over that they weren't able to. So. But most of the data, all of the bibliographic coding, templates, whatever, have already been brought over into Sierra, and we're able to actually check that out before we go live. So this is the time to do that type of thing. The one thing that is a little new is this Browse button here. If we go back to Millennium and we open one of these records, your Browse button was at the very top of your row here in the record view, and you would just click Browse to go back to this screen. Well, it's a little different in Sierra. The Browse button is always going to be in this location here on the far left-hand side, and if you click on that, it just does the same thing for the most part. It gets rid of that window, and then you can go do some other searching on a different record. Before we get into actually looking at actual serials functions, I wanted to also talk a little bit about the browse query. That's a tool that's available in all of these database areas such as catalog, serials check-in, or search holds mode. I don't see it here, but it's underneath circulation. Any place that you're searching the database, you should be able to see this tool here under the Tools command menu. You click on Browse Query, and you can actually do this in preview mode. If you click on Browse Query, it brings up this nice little window that looks almost identical to Create Lists. But what you're doing is they're searching the database for specific information and bringing it into your search results. It's not really creating a list. It's bringing information into Sierra search results so you can actually work with them. And the example that I've been using is that of doing a patron phone number search or a patron email address search. So if I had a problem with a patron who was getting phone calls that should not be, I need to find out who actually has that number in our patron record database. So I could do a patron search, search the entire database, and just do a quick search on that particular phone number. And you can do this for email addresses, any stored record type. It doesn't have to be limited to anything in a patron record. It could be item, bib, anything that you can think of that you would want to bring into a search result so you could actually view a list of items. So if I do my search here, this is their test database, so of course it's got 555 records all over the place. But these are, even though we're in serials check-in mode, these are all patron records, so I can double-click on that patron record and bring it into my display pane for editing or whatever I wanted to do with it. But you can see the applications for this. This has always been an issue with Millennium to my mind. If I wanted to do a quick search on an email address or a patron phone number, I've got to create a list, go through all that monotony of creating a list and let it run through the entire database to get it. With this, you're not using an index, but it's using some Lucene index and kind of speed up the process. It's really good for small bits of information like a specific patron or a record that you want to bring up that has a very specific set of criteria that you're after. It's not really great for like large result sets. I've noticed that it tends to take a little while to return those results. Your experience may be different, but when I did it in preview mode, looking at all emails that end with gmail.com or something like that, it took a little bit more time to return the results. So for small result sets, it's pretty good. Anything larger than that, you probably want to use create lists. And the only drawback with using this browse query is that you can't really save your results. It is only for a browse, looking at the records in a browse mode only. You're not going to be able to save anything off. If you want to save it, you need to create a list and then export it. However, you can, if you do have saved searches or existing searches and create lists, you can bring those into this window and then run the search that way. So if we retrieve a saved query here, I can do a patron phone search. This is kind of a messy one. But you can bring that right into your browse query and just run it straight from here. And just modify whatever you need to do up here and run the search. Notice as soon as I hit Tools Browse Query, it got rid of my search results. So it's a very temporary holding cell for your data. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Okay, regarding serials functions, first off I wanted to show you some areas underneath settings that you'll need to check or want to compare to Millennium while we're in preview mode. The first area regarding serials is the New Records tab and the settings for options for new records. So if you might want to see how this stacks up to what you're currently using in Millennium right now. So if this doesn't match up, if there's this information on this tab does not match what you're currently using in Millennium, then you'll need to notify Kate at the help desk and let her know that some of these settings need to change. That's the only way that they're going to be permanently fixed for your login. So options for new records, templates. This is under record templates. you might want to go through and just look at some. In our database, it's called holdings. In this database, I'm sorry, it's called holdings. In ours, it's check-in. And just make sure that your check-in templates are set up correctly here as they are in Millennium. And I think the last one was records. This is it. Yeah, records to attach to new bibliographic records. This is just going back to that new records tab, just to verify that this bottom list is the things that you need checked. So that's settings. If we go to admin options, this is a smaller list, but there is a area underneath here, the edit tab, and you want to compare both this to what you currently have in Millennium as well. Some of this may be different and we need to change it. In particular, the box note on the checking card, make sure that that matches up, and also the list display mode. These two areas here. Okay, so since we're in Serials Check-In, we'll do our search for Time Magazine again. Okay, and this is the area or the title that we're going to actually look at is their Time Magazine record. And as you can see, this looks pretty much like you would expect to see in Millennium. A little different, of course, just in terms of how it's organized, but for the most part, everything looks the same. The cards, everything you've built up to this point in terms of cards and your holdings information are all going to be transferred over, so there's no need to worry about having to recreate the wheel with any of your settings or cards. The checking card itself, I mean, we can go through the summary here if you'd like. Again, they use holdings in this database, ours is check-in. But you can see all, just like you would in the Millennium version of our database. I'm just interested in holdings, so I can go back here. One thing that I was a little disappointed to learn with Serials Check-In is, I know this is something a lot of you like, is the ability to change the check-in box colors. Currently, right now, we cannot change the check-in box colors. So whatever they have given us is what we have to work with. I'm not sure if they look exactly the same as this yet in our preview. My guess is they'll be bringing over some kind of default or whatever we're using now for our check-in box colors. There is a feature enhancement to bring this into play, and there are a lot of people who want this. So it's going to happen. It's just a matter of the time. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. This usually would be underneath the Edit Preferences area, but it's not. If I click on this, it's not really going to show you anything underneath Editor Colors that would have any impact on the check-in box. My guess is that's where they're going to put it eventually. If we go to the boxes and just do a right-click, all these options that you see here should be the same as what you would see in Millennium or very close to it. Your options for create, modify, extrapolate, delete, and update are pretty much the same. I don't think there's anything different. I did a comparison yesterday. There may be a few changes, but for the most part, you're going to see exactly what you're seeing in Millennium. There's also the undo command, which is very helpful. If we go to routing, just wanted to show you that. some of you don't use routing. Milwaukee Public uses it quite a bit, so I just want to talk about it real briefly. I created a routing record in their database for me. And so I just added a routing, a real simple routing record for myself, and I added the this one title here, Library and Information Science Abstracts. If I wanted to add additional journals to this list for me, I would just click on Add Journal and then use the database to select the title that I wanted, and then it would add it to my list. So we can time if you want to. Okay, so I've added time to my routing list here, so when that title comes in, I should be getting new issues sent to me. It's pretty much the same process. You can click the box to notify by email. I'm not sure if that's in our current routing. I didn't get a chance to take a look at that. But you can also, at the bottom here, suspend notification on the bottom. So if someone receives on one of these issues within this date range, so for example, April, then it won't send me any of these issues. So for example, if I'm on vacation or something like that, then I'll just skip over me and just send it to the next person. Nothing really has changed too much with routing. I hope it works a little bit better than it does in Millennium. We've had problems with this in the past. And I also wanted to talk about claiming. I did a real quick search on the claiming here to see what differences there were in Millennium. And maybe someone else out there who has more experience could tell me, but I didn't see too much of a difference. It will check the entire range of check-in records for anything that needs to be claimed if you click on Start. And then it will just go to, you will go to either click on Next or Claim One, Claim All, very much the same way you do it in Millennium. And maybe there's a difference here, but I haven't really noticed it. So as you can see, there's a whole lot of information here, a lot of claimed issues that need to be claimed. So then we'll go ahead and stop this. So as far as I could tell, there's really nothing different about that whole process. Those were the only areas I wanted to cover with regard to serials, specific serials. Binding and bindery I don't deal with as much, so if anyone has questions about that, I can either talk with someone about binding and bindery, or request that information from Innovative and see what we can do for you. I did want to talk about some known issues with regard to serials that might be still in effect by the time we go live on April 2nd. One of those is the serials claiming record count display can be incorrect. So when staff claim records from a review file, the claiming program correctly scans the entire review file, but the record count that the system displays for a record to review for claiming is incorrect. For example, a record that is actually 77 in the file might display as 45 out of 100. So it's more of a display issue, that the actual records are there, it's just that the number being displayed is a little off. There's also a known issue with regard to the check-in record public note display. So when staff add a bindery note to a check-in box with a public note and serials, only the bindery note displays in the Webpack. Now, the Webpack should normally display the bindery note as well as the original public note from the check-in box. So both of those two are in review with software engineering. If this is really mission critical, we can raise it with them and get them to solve it right away. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Okay, well that's really all I had in terms of presentation. If you have any questions or anything I can help to answer, please use the chat window now and raise it so we can bring it up to the entire group. Okay. Any questions? I'll give you a few more seconds here to type something in. I know it takes a little bit of time to get that all out there. Okay, hearing nothing, I just wanted to send out, oh, here we go. Nicole has a question. Nicole says, I noticed when you were in a record, the same card number appeared for a record and bib and card. Will we not be able to see the different numbers? And I think I might unmute you, Nicole, so you can. Oops, let me just find you here in the list. Nicole, I might ask you to just kind of talk us through this a little bit. I'm going to go back to the serials check-in. I've unmuted you so you can go ahead and talk. Let's go back to that Time magazine so you can kind of see what we're looking at. Okay, so I kind of see what you're talking about. The same card number appeared for record and bib and card. Let's take a look at, just do a comparison against our own database here. You know, I see and maybe I just got this wrong, but it seems like the record, card, holdings are pretty much the same across the board. The bid number displays here in Sierra at the top, but the record, card, and holdings numbers are all different. Is that what you're referring to, or am I totally missing the boat? Okay. We can certainly work with you with any questions you have about those. I think but everything that you see here at the top of the Millennium screens, pretty much what you're going to see here in Millennium. I'm sorry, Sierra. Okay. Any other questions? If you're in preview mode, you will notice that if you go into this mini menu, when you right-click on a card box, a lot of this will be grayed out. In fact, most of it's going to be grayed out. It's just because we're in preview mode and they won't allow access to this area of the database. But when we go live on April 2nd, all that will light up. Okay, just a reminder, we do have an kind of a town hall Q&A, two Q&A sessions that are going to be on March 26th and 27th. If you use the same form that you used to sign up for this session, you'll see it there. So if anything comes up between now and that time regarding Sierra, it could be anything, not just serials related. Feel free to join in on that session and just raise your question there. And we should have plenty of time to address those. Okay, so thanks everybody. I appreciate your time. And of course, if you have any questions regarding Sierra, anything related to the new interface, please let me know and I will do my best to help you out. Thanks everybody. Have a good day.